There's a kind of peace you only find once in a lifetime. For me, it came in the form of a red brick house tucked away at the edge of a quiet cul-de-sac. It wasn't just a house. It was a place where my daughter's laugh echoed to the hallways, where my son raced his bike down the driveway, and where my wife and I stole slow dances in the kitchen when the world felt too loud. That house was our beginning, our calm, our place to just be. I'd worked my whole life in law, sat on a federal bench, heard cases that shook communities, and handed down justice with a steady hand. But in that home, I was just Raymond, dad, husband, neighbor. We didn't need much. We had each other, and that was enough. But peace has a way of drawing attention. A letter in the mailbox, polished, formal, and wrapped in what I can only describe as corporate cheerfulness. Dear neighbor, welcome to the beginning of a brighter, more unified community. As of January 1st, we're proud to introduce the West Pine Homeowners Association. Membership is mandatory. Dues, $175 per month. Compliance ensures harmony. I blinked at the words. Mandatory? Dues? I reread it twice. My property wasn't under HOA jurisdiction. I knew that not just from memory, but from the actual property records. I'd done my homework before we bought the place. We were outside those lines for a reason. We liked our freedom. Still, I figured this was a clerical mistake. So I did what anyone reasonable would do. I wrote back, "Thank you for the notice. However, our property lies outside the HOA boundaries. We'll continue maintaining our home independently. Wishing you the best." Simple, polite, done. Or so I thought. 2 weeks later, a second letter arrived. This one didn't have the same cheerful tone. You are in violation of community standards. Continued refusal to join will result in fines and legal enforcement. Legal enforcement? I sat there, letter in hand, with a strange mix of disbelief and frustration settling in my gut. I've seen my share of manipulation in courtrooms, in boardrooms, in moments where people thought power gave them permission. But I never expected it in my own mailbox. I looked at my wife, Evelyn, and she gave me the small, tired smile, the kind that says, "Not again." We were quiet over dinner that night. There was nothing to panic about yet, but the peace we once had was already starting to crack. I decided to pay a visit to the HOA meeting. It was held in the gymnasium of the local elementary school. Fold-out chairs, plastic tables, that smell of floor wax and coffee. Neighbors I'd waved for years sat nodding as a man in a tailored Navy suit spoke confidently at the front. His name was Martin Greeley, the HOA president. His voice was smooth, a little too polished, like someone who practices smiles in the mirror. When the Q&A opened, I raised my hand. "My name's Raymond Cole. I live at the edge of the development, and I believe there's been a misunderstanding. My property was built prior to the HOA boundaries and isn't included in the association." Martin tilted his head, still smiling. "Well, Mr. Cole, communities change. Boundaries shift. We're all one neighborhood now. I respect community. I believe in order," I said, "but I also believe in law. And the law says you have no authority over my home." The room grew quiet. Martin's smile never left, but his eyes hardened just for a second. "I'm sure we'll find a way to work this out," he said, his voice syrupy. I nodded, calm on the outside, but I could feel it, the shift in the air. This wasn't going to go away quietly. The weeks that followed felt like something out of a bad dream. We started getting strange fines taped to our front door, complaints about lawn height, non-compliant mailbox color. Trash appeared on our lawn. Our mailbox was smashed. Twice. Even our kids noticed someone following them home from school one afternoon. Evelyn held it together for the kids, but I saw it in her eyes, that weight of wondering if we were safe in the place we loved most. I kept records. Every note, every photo, every incident. I wasn't scared. I was angry. Not the kind that explodes, but the kind that simmers. The kind that builds something stronger than revenge. Resolve. I wrote one final letter. I have documented every act of misconduct. Any further harassment will be met with legal action. My property is not under your governance. Cease all contact. I delivered it to Martin myself. He opened the letter, skimmed it, and looked up with this cool, rehearsed expression. You think that title of yours makes you untouchable? I stared at him for a moment. It doesn't, I said, but truth does. Then he said something I'll never forget. Let's see what truth looks like when your house is a pile of ash. He smiled when he said it, like he was joking, but something in his tone. It didn't feel like a joke. And for the first time, I felt it, the chill of something deeper than ego or pride. I felt the start of something dangerous. I'll never forget the sound Evelyn made that night. It wasn't a scream. It was something deeper, raw, broken. The kind of sound that comes when your entire world begins to unravel in front of you. I'd stepped out back to roll in a recycling bin. The sky was unusually still, quiet, but then this sharp, bitter smell hit my nose. Not your typical grill or chimney smoke. No, this was chemical. Wrong. I looked toward the fence, and that's when I saw it. The fire was already spreading, clawing up the wooden panels like it had been waiting for nightfall. Within seconds, it licked the edge of the house. Ev, get the kids. Now! The words barely left my mouth before I heard our daughter, Lily, sobbing at the top of the stairs. Our son, Josh, stood frozen, clutching his tablet, eyes wide like he was seeing a monster rise from the floorboards. The hose did nothing. By the time the firefighters arrived, our living room had collapsed in on itself. My kids' rooms weren't safe anymore. We stood barefoot in the wet grass, Evelyn holding the kids, me standing just a few feet away, hands shaking but clenched, watching everything we built, everything we loved, burn. The fire chief gave me a solemn look the next morning. Still under investigation, he said, but it doesn't look natural. No electrical faults, no gas leaks, no candles left burning. But what he didn't say the word we were all thinking, arson. I knew what I saw. Burn patterns too clean. The fire moved like it knew where to go. And there was more. As the crews dug through the blackened remains of the backyard, one of the officers handed me a half-burnt envelope, charred at the edges. But the writing? Still legible. You should have joined us. I stared at it for a long time. Evelyn sat down next to me, silent, her hand finding mine. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Someone had done this. Someone had made a choice. And now, so would I. The next few days were surreal. We were staying with Evelyn's cousin down the block. Just a couple of spare mattresses on the floor and mismatched blankets. But it felt safe. One afternoon, I walked back to the house. Or what was left of it. I didn't know why. Maybe to make sense of it. Maybe to say goodbye. But as I turned the corner, I saw a few neighbors standing across the street. They didn't speak, just watched. I used to wave at them every morning. I used to bring their trash bins in when they forgot. And now, they looked at me like I was a story on the news. Something tragic, but far away. Except one woman crossed the street. "I'm sorry," she said, holding a Tupperware lasagna with trembling hands. I should have said something sooner. She wasn't the last. The next day, another neighbor stopped by. Then 2 more. They started sharing stories. Quietly, nervously. Fines for having too many potted plants. Threats over holiday decorations. Pressure to vote a certain way in HOA meetings. We didn't know how bad it was, one man admitted, not until this. The fire scared them, but it also woke them up. They realized this wasn't just my problem. It was ours, usually on the bench. This time, I sat across the table. Filing the suit wasn't emotional. It was methodical. Civil harassment, extortion, abuse of governance, property destruction. I listed Martin Greeley by name. An entire board. I included the threats, the fines, the note, and the smoldering remains of what used to be my living room. But this wasn't about vengeance. It was about truth. I wasn't filing this because I was a judge. I was filing it because I was a husband, a father, a man who had his life set on fire because he said no to the wrong people. And I knew, deep in my bones, that if I didn't stand now, no one ever would. I thought my years on the bench might give me some kind of shield. that maybe my position would make people think twice. But it didn't. The system moved slowly. Insurance paperwork piled up. Investigators hesitated. The HOA board stayed quiet. Too quiet. Until they issued a public statement. We are saddened by the incident at Mr. Cole's residence. While we await the results of the investigation, we remain focused on building a safer, better community. Safer? They burned my children's bedrooms. Better? They threatened me for refusing to pay them to do it. And still they tried to spin it. Make it look like I was some kind of troublemaker. A bitter old man who just didn't want to follow the rules. So I gave them the one thing they couldn't silence. My voice. I stood in front of the ashes of our home and held a press conference. No suit, no gavel, just jeans, a flannel shirt, and everything I had left. This isn't just about a house, I said. It's about a system that bullies people into silence. It's about power unchecked and unearned. And I won't be quiet anymore. Reporters showed up. So did the neighbors. The story started to spread. Online, in the news, across the country. And just like that, the people the HOA feared most weren't the ones with titles. It was the ones with nothing left to lose. Courtrooms had always felt like home to me. Marble floors, sharp echoes, the hush before the gavel drops. But this time it felt foreign. I wasn't walking in with authority. I wasn't wearing robes. I wasn't the one people rose for. This time I was just a man whose house had been burned to the ground, a father trying to protect what was left of his family, a husband holding on to the last thread of normal. Evelyn came with me, fingers gently laced in mine. She squeezed my hand right before I stepped inside the courtroom. "This time," she whispered, "you speak for all of us." I nodded, but truthfully, I was terrified, not of losing, but of being unheard, of watching the pain we lived through get buried under legal jargon and polished excuses. Martin Greeley sat across the room in a navy blazer and smug expression, flanked by two expensive attorneys who wore their smirks like armor. Their defense? There's no evidence. No direct connection between the HOA and the fire. Not even a flinch. Like they hadn't scorched my life down to its skeleton. But I had something stronger than paperwork. I had the truth. When I took the stand, I didn't read from notes. I didn't recite statutes. I looked the jury in the eye and told them what it feels like to tuck your kids into bed in a motel room because their toys turned to ashes. What it's like to stare into a flame and wonder who hated you enough to light it. And when I held up the half-burnt note, "You should have joined us," even the judge's face shifted. That's when I knew. They were finally listening. The days that followed were heavy. Testimonies, statements, objections, legal maneuvers that made your stomach churn and your brain ache. But then something changed. A woman I barely recognized raised her hand to testify. Her name was Clara Maddox, HOA board secretary. Lived 3 doors down from us. Tiny, quiet woman who walked her dog twice a day and kept to herself. She walked up, small but steady, and sat in the witness chair. She looked at Martin, then at me. "I don't want to be afraid anymore," she said. Her voice trembled, but her words were steady. She spoke about overhearing a conversation in the board meeting. Martin threatening to send a message to me. He said, if Mr. Cole wouldn't join the HOA, he didn't deserve to be part of the neighborhood. Silence. You could feel the mood shift. The defense lawyers scribbled notes like madmen, but no amount of strategy could unsay what Clara had just said. That single moment, it broke something open. Within days, others came forward too. Quiet voices, long ignored. The old man fined $150 for planting tomatoes instead of ornamental shrubs. A young mom reprimanded for letting her kid draw chalk hearts on the sidewalk. A couple told to repaint their door because it wasn't neutral enough. Each of them stood up now, and for the first time, they weren't standing alone. I didn't expect what came next. News vans, microphones, lights in our driveway. Not because of me, but because of us. The media caught wind of the case. And suddenly our quiet neighborhood was on every news ticker in the country. But the real headline? It wasn't Judge's home burned. It was Neighborhood says no more. At the next HOA meeting, they expected the usual crowd. 10 people, bored faces, rubber stamp votes. Instead, 200 neighbors showed up, packed into the community center. Some standing on the sidewalk, some with signs. And what they said was clear. We're done being quiet. We want change. We are taking our neighborhood back. Martin showed up late. He walked in like he still owned the room. He didn't. They voted. That night, right there, Martin Greeley, removed, board dissolved. The man who lit the match, figuratively or literally, was out, not because the court said so, but because we did. Weeks later, the courtroom fell silent once again. The jury came back. We find in favor of the plaintiff. The words echoed like thunder. We were awarded damages. The court held the HOA accountable. Civil harassment, abuse of power, complicity, and the sheriff's department? They opened a criminal investigation into the fire. Martin wasn't smiling anymore. I didn't celebrate in court. Instead, I stepped outside, looked up at the sky, and exhaled. It wasn't over, but the fight had shifted. We moved back home a few months later. The house was new, yes, but it was more than lumber and drywall. Evelyn decorated it the same way she had when we first got married. Josh hung a sign above the garage that said, "Still standing." Lily asked if we could have a chalkboard wall inside the kitchen, "So no one can tell us what to draw," she said. I hugged her so tight she squealed. Sometimes, late at night, I still smell smoke in my dreams. But then I hear my kids laughing down the hall. I see Evelyn dancing in the kitchen while spaghetti boils. I walk past our garden, her garden, and know this. The fire didn't win. If anything, it revealed who we were. It showed us the cost of silence and the power of standing up. I tell this story not because I want sympathy. I tell it because someone out there is quietly being pushed, bullied by people in power hiding behind rules, threatened for saying no to control. And maybe you think you're alone, that no one will believe you, that speaking up won't change anything. But I'm here to tell you, it can. Sometimes justice starts with losing everything, but it ends with remembering who you are.